gun down, Cora!
I barked, but the muzzle flash answered first. The crack split the evening air like a whip. Clara screamed, clutching her shoulder as the bullet ripped through the cedar post and scattered wood splinters across the porch. For a heartbeat, the neighborhood froze. Just wind, gunpowder, and the sound of my wife's breathing stuttering in pain. Then everything rewound to the moment that started it. Cora slammed the HOA citation into my chest before I could even reach Mira. Her voice cracked like a whip over the porch rail. "You've been warned twice, Judge Mercer. That swing violates community symmetry, and now your wife's sitting on it again." Cora Lindell, president of the Silver Pines Estates Board, stood there with her clipboard angled like a badge. She wasn't asking, she was declaring ownership of my front yard. The faint tremor in her lips didn't soften her tone. "You remove it by sunset, or I'll have maintenance take it down myself." The paper fluttered once in my hands before I said it, quiet even. "That swing's anchored to concrete. It's not coming down without a permit." I watched her expression twitch. She didn't expect resistance. She certainly didn't expect me to know the difference between common ground codes and private foundation fixtures. If you think HOA presidents can't overstep until someone bleeds, you're wrong. And before you scroll, hit subscribe now. Because by the time I finish this story, you'll know how a single line of law turned the entire board inside out. "My name's Daniel Mercer," I said finally, forcing my breath steady. "Former sheriff, current state judge, and that swing you're threatening, I built it for my wife, who's 7 months pregnant and can't walk the lake path anymore." Her clipboard lowered a fraction. The confidence in her shoulders faltered. "So, unless you're enforcing empathy, Cora, I'd advise you to step off my porch." But she didn't. She shifted her weight, sneered, and tapped her pen like a trigger. "Rules don't bend for sentiment, Judge. Your title means nothing here." She spat the last word as if the neighborhood itself were a courtroom she owned. Then she pointed at the swing, fresh cedar, steel bolts glinting in afternoon light, as if it were an act of rebellion. The porch swing wasn't just furniture. It was the first thing I'd built after Clara's miscarriage 3 years ago, a promise carved in grain and patience. She used to sway there at sunset, whispering that the breeze felt like hope. When we moved to Silver Pines, she smiled for the first time in months, tracing her hand along the armrest I'd sanded smooth. I remember telling her, "No one can take this one from us." I meant it. Now Clara stood behind me on the porch, one hand over her stomach, the other gripping the railing to keep balance. "I'm not moving, Daniel," she whispered, her voice small but firm. "She can fine us, threaten us, but I won't hide again." The wind caught her hair, tossing it across her face, and something deep in me went still. Cora laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Then maybe you'll understand consequences the hard way." She took a step closer, her heel scraping the wood. I could smell her perfume, sharp and chemical. My pulse slowed the way it used to on raids. My eyes locked on the small bulge under her jacket. Standard compact handgun, holstered wrong, barrel angled toward the ground. Off-duty carry, likely unauthorized on HOA property. "You're shaking, Cora," I said quietly. "You don't want to do this." "Don't tell me what I want," she hissed. The world thinned to the sound of cicadas. Clara took a step back. The clipboard hit the ground. Then, metal scraping leather, Cora drew. A flash, a pop, a ricochet off the railing. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, and Clara stumbled, clutching her shoulder. I was across the porch in seconds, dropping to my knees beside her, pressing my hand against the wound. Shallow, graze, blood, but not deep. I met Cora's eyes, and for the first time she looked like she realized she'd fired a weapon, not an opinion. "You just discharged a firearm on private property," I said. My voice didn't rise. "You're done." She stammered something about self-defense, about feeling threatened, but the words fell apart before they reached me. Behind her, across the cul-de-sac, blinds shifted. Neighbors peered through glass, phones half raised, deciding whether to film or flee. The smell of burnt cedar lingered, where the bullet had shaved a splinter off the porch post. I didn't look away from Cora. "You've just turned a code violation into a criminal act." For a long second, she said nothing. Then she turned, heels snapping against the pavement as she stormed down the path toward her SUV. Clara's breath trembled against my shoulder. "It's okay," I murmured. "You're okay." But even as sirens began to rise in the distance, I knew she wasn't the one who needed saving. The HOA was, from its own illusion of power, and I was the only man in Silver Pines who knew exactly how to dismantle it, lawfully. The sirens grew louder as the red strobes bounced off the trimmed hedges and glass driveways of Silver Pines. By the time the first cruiser pulled up, Cora's SUV was already gone. 2 deputies stepped out, young, nervous, eyes flicking between my wife's wound and my badge on the porch table. One of them recognized me. His face went pale. "Judge Mercer?" he asked. I nodded once. "My wife's been grazed. She needs medical attention, not questions." They followed protocol anyway. Photos, angles, the flattened slug lodged in the cedar post. Paramedics arrived, soft voices and steady hands, patching Clara's shoulder as neighbors watched from their windows. The same people who voted Cora into power now hid behind their blinds, whispering. No one stepped forward to say what they'd seen. That silence hit harder than the shot itself. At the hospital, I sat beside Clara while the nurse cleaned the wound. "You're lucky," she said softly. "Half an inch deeper and—" She didn't finish. Clara just smiled weakly and said, "Luck had nothing to do with it." Her grip found my hand, trembling but stubborn. That was my wife, bleeding and defiant. When Detective Reeves arrived, I expected routine. Instead, I got hesitance. He'd worked under me once, back when I was still sheriff. "Dan," he said quietly, "you know I've got to treat this by the book." "I'd expect nothing less," I told him. He sighed. "Cora's already filed her own report, claims she feared for her safety." I almost laughed. "She pulled a weapon on a pregnant woman. Don't tell me that's standing up in court." He hesitated again, eyes flicking toward the hospital curtain. "Problem is, her board's already framing it as a property dispute gone bad. They're saying she was enforcing HOA compliance when things got heated." I leaned forward. "A firearm isn't a compliance tool." Reeves lowered his voice. "Between you and me, her husband's brother sits on the county council. Politics are going to twist this fast. You need to stay clean of it, Dan. Let the DA handle the charges." That word, clean, stung, as if staying silent were the same as staying just. But he was right about one thing. I couldn't touch this case from the bench, so I watched my wife breathe, counted the monitor beeps, and made a silent promise. If I couldn't fight it with a badge, I'd dismantle it through law itself. When we returned home the next morning, yellow tape circled the porch like a bruise. The HOA had already left a new citation on our mailbox. "Unsafe structural addition pending removal." The ink was fresh, the arrogance burned. "Daniel," Clara whispered, "they're trying to erase what happened." "No," I said. "They're documenting their own crime scene." By afternoon, Marilyn Cutter, the HOA's treasurer, showed up with 2 board members and a clipboard. "We're here to inspect damages for community liability," she said. Her tone was polite, but her eyes gleamed with calculation. "You have no liability," I answered. "You have exposure." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said. "If a board member fires a gun on common property, your association's insurance is liable, assuming it exists." Her pen froze midair. That's when I saw it, the flicker of panic, the hesitation of someone who knows the policy she's supposed to quote doesn't actually exist. I tucked that observation away, small, quiet, deadly. A seed for later. After they left, I stood on the porch beside the patched railing. The wood still smelled of smoke and antiseptic. I ran my hand over the splintered groove the bullet had carved, a reminder of both violence and precision. In my years on the bench, I'd learned one thing. The law doesn't need anger to win. It needs patience and evidence. That night, as Clara slept, I opened my laptop and pulled up the county's corporate registry. Silver Pines Estates HOA, Incorporated. The file date stopped at last year. No renewal submission, no updated officers, no insurance verification form. Nothing. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. If those records were accurate, the HOA's authority had legally expired months ago. Every citation, every fine, every so-called violation, all of it void. Reeves's warning echoed in my head, stay clean. But now I understood the advantage. I didn't need to chase justice with a badge. I just needed to let the HOA collapse under its own neglected paperwork. When I closed the laptop, the reflection of the swing shimmered in the dark glass, swaying gently in the night breeze. It looked fragile, peaceful, like Clara's heartbeat. I made a silent vow. By the time the sun rose again, Silver Pines would know what it means when a man of the law is pushed too far. The next morning, the neighborhood felt rehearsed, lawns trimmed, driveways rinsed, as if Silver Pines were scrubbing away the gunshot that cracked through its illusion of order. I stepped onto the porch with a mug of cold coffee, the same laptop still open inside. The HOA file page blinked in my head like a pulse. Status, expired. I had proof, but not yet a witness. That's when I saw Evan Price standing across the street, hands stuffed deep into his jacket pockets, his old deputy badge glinting faintly on his keychain. He looked like a man carrying two weights, duty and shame, the kind of posture that folds the shoulders inward, that keeps the chin down. He'd served 30 years in law enforcement before retiring into quiet suburbia, probably thinking Silver Pines would be his calm after the storm. Instead, he got Cora Lindell. He hesitated before crossing the road. "Morning, Judge," he said, voice barely above the wind. "Morning, Deputy," I answered. The title slipped out intentionally. His eyes flicked up, startled, then away again. He wasn't here officially. He was here because something inside him itched too loud to ignore. He lingered near the porch steps, not stepping fully onto the boards, like the wood itself might convict him. His gaze found the patch where Clara had bled, then darted to the repaired railing. His throat worked before he spoke. "Heard she's recovering." "She is," I said. "Thanks for asking." He nodded once, then shifted his weight, the boards creaking under half his boots. "Dan, you know how it looks. The board's saying Cora acted in fear. Folks are split down the middle." "Are they?" I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck. The gesture said more than his words. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say he'd seen through the spin, that the truth was choking him. But years in uniform teach a man to measure speech, not spill it. "She shouldn't have had that weapon," he muttered finally. "There's a lot she shouldn't have," I said, "including authority." That made him glance up, and for the first time, his eyes met mine, not as neighbor to neighbor, but lawman to lawman. He saw the direction my mind was moving. "You're building something," he said quietly. "I'm verifying something," I corrected. "The HOA's been operating without legal standing. No insurance, no filings, no renewal. If that's true, every rule they've enforced since April is void." He exhaled through his nose, the breath sharp and heavy. His hands clenched and unclenched, the skin over his knuckles pale. "You're saying Cora's been using authority she doesn't even have." "I'm saying she's been impersonating it." That word hit him, his jaw flexed, guilt moving beneath the surface like a pulse. He'd sat next to her in those meetings, nodded when she voted, signed letters bearing her name. He wasn't innocent, but he wasn't corrupt either, just cornered by complicity. "You could expose this," I said. "Help clean it up before the county steps in." He didn't answer right away. His boot tapped once, twice, against the step, a nervous rhythm. His shoulders shifted as if trying to shake off invisible hands. "Dan, you know what happens if I talk? They'll drag me with them." I signed off on half those citations. "Intent matters more than ink," I said. "You didn't fire the gun." He laughed softly, bitterly. "No, I just helped her load the bullets." That silence between us stretched long. A leaf skittered across the road, catching in the gutter. Clara's voice drifted from inside, soft, steady, humming, something tuneless. Evan's eyes flicked toward the doorway, then away, as if even looking at her was an admission. "You've still got your badge," I said quietly. "Might not wear it anymore, but it still means something." He looked down at the keychain, fingers trembling slightly as he turned it in his palm. Then he slipped it back into his pocket like contraband. "You didn't hear this from me," he muttered. "But the board voted not to renew the insurance last winter, said premiums were too high. They figured no one would notice. The paperwork never got filed." My pulse steadied. That was the thread I needed, spoken confirmation from inside the system. I didn't show relief, I just nodded once. "Appreciate the neighborly chat." He stepped back, retreating down the path, eyes fixed on the pavement. His walk was stiff, as if each step cost him something. At the edge of the road, he paused and turned slightly, guilt etched across his face. "Be careful, Dan. You corner a snake, even a small one, it'll strike again." "Then I'll cut off its head," I said. He didn't smile, just turned away, shoulders heavy, disappearing between the identical mailboxes and manicured shrubs. I watched him go, the image burned in memory, the witness who couldn't yet testify, the man torn between silence and truth. Inside, the swing creaked in the morning breeze. I looked at it once more and whispered to myself, "That's one confession down. The rest, I'll get through the law." By the next afternoon, Silver Pines looked the way all guilty places do, too perfect. Lawns mowed in precise lines, driveways spotless, neighbors pretending nothing happened. But under that polished surface, something rotten stirred. The HOA doubled down. A new letter arrived, taped right to the swing's chain, as if mocking me. Immediate removal required. Unsafe structure. The signature at the bottom wasn't Cora's this time. It was Marilyn Cutter's, the treasurer who'd once claimed to handle the boring paperwork. I folded the notice slowly, slid it into my jacket, and drove to the community clubhouse. It was midweek, but their office lights were on. Marilyn never missed a chance to display power behind glass. She sat at the reception desk, surrounded by filing cabinets and fake plants, her hair pulled tight in a bun that gleamed under fluorescent light. When she saw me, her lips curved into a practiced, brittle smile. "Judge Mercer," she said, "I was just about to contact you regarding your outstanding fines." "Fines," I repeated. "You're still issuing those?" Her pen scratched across a ledger. "Of course. Until your property complies with community standards, penalties will continue to accrue. That swing is on private property," I cut in, "and your authority to issue penalties expired 6 months ago." That got her attention. The pen froze mid-line. She blinked once, twice, then composed herself. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying," I said. "I'm stating. The Silver Pines HOA failed to renew its corporate registration with the state, which means, legally, you're not an operating entity. You're a group of neighbors pretending to be one." Her throat moved as she swallowed. "That's ridiculous. We're fully compliant." "Then you won't mind showing me your renewal certificate." Her chair creaked as she leaned back, suddenly busy with her computer mouse. "I don't have to show you anything without a formal request." "That's fine," I said, sliding a folded paper across the desk. Printout of the state registry. Status. Expired. "Consider this formal notice." The flicker of fear was brief but real. Her fingers twitched, tapping the edge of her keyboard like a metronome. "This will cause unnecessary confusion among residents," she said finally. "We'll fix the paperwork soon." "Good luck explaining the illegal fines in the meantime," I replied. "You've been taking money without authority. That's fraud under state statute." Her confidence fractured. She forced a tight smile. "Judge, surely you don't want to make a scene. We're all neighbors here." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "A scene's what you get when you push a man who knows the law further than you understand it." Outside, the wind picked up, scattering leaves across the marble walkway. I left her there, eyes darting toward the filing cabinet behind her, already imagining what she'd shred first. By the time I reached home, the air in the house felt heavy. Clara sat on the couch, her arm bandaged but healing, a cup of tea cooling beside her. "You went to them," she said softly. "I did." "Did they listen?" I shook my head. "They'll pretend to fix it, then they'll retaliate." "Then what happens next?" I looked at the swing through the window, swaying slowly under gray skies. "Next, we stop waiting for justice to come to us." That evening, as rain slicked the pavement, I called Detective Reeves. "I'm not asking for intervention," I told him. "I'm giving notice. The HOA is operating without standing. You'll want that documented before it turns criminal." He sighed. "Dan, you sure you want to light that match?" "It's already burning," I said. After the call, I stepped onto the porch. Across the cul-de-sac, porch lights blinked on in sequence like wary eyes. People were watching again, but not to gossip. They were waiting to see whether I'd win or vanish like the last homeowner who fought back. Thunder rolled low over the pines. I pulled the crumpled citation from my pocket and pinned it back to the swing chain, this time with a small note attached, "Invalid under expired charter. Pending injunction." It wasn't defiance, it was documentation. The first brick in a legal wall, I was building one clause at a time. As I stood there, headlights turned the corner. Evan's truck. He slowed, rolled down the window, expression unreadable. "You just painted a target on yourself," he said. I nodded. "Good. Makes it easier for them to aim." He didn't reply, just drove off, taillights vanishing into rain. Behind me, Clara's voice carried through the screen door. "Daniel, come inside. You're soaked." "In a minute," I said. Because out there, beneath the storm, I could feel the shift, the first tremor of an empire realizing it might crumble under the weight of its own forgotten paperwork. The next morning broke in silver light and quiet rain. I drove into the city alone, windshield wipers pacing the rhythm of my thoughts. Clara had wanted to come, but I needed distance between her and what was coming next. Silver Pines had declared war through bureaucracy, and I intended to answer in kind. The county records building loomed like an old courthouse, gray stone and echoing hallways. It smelled of dust and toner, the scent of forgotten authority. A woman at the front desk greeted me with a practiced smile. Her badge read, "Shelley, Clerk's Office." "Morning," said, setting my briefcase on the counter. "I'm here to verify corporate filings for Silver Pines Estates Homeowners Association," she typed, nails clacking against the keyboard. "Name again? Silver Pines Estates HOA, Incorporated," I repeated. "Registered under Forsyth County." Her screen reflected in her glasses, a pale blue flicker. That one's odd. Last annual report shows as received but never processed. No renewal confirmation." "What does that mean legally?" She turned the monitor slightly toward me. "Means the entity's in administrative suspension. Technically, it's not authorized to operate until reinstatement." Administrative suspension. Those words landed like a gavel. Not revoked, not dissolved, but stripped of function. No standing to fine, enforce, or represent property owners. I kept my voice steady. "Can you provide a certified copy?" "Sure can," she said. $5 fee. I handed her a 10 and watched as she printed, stamped, and sealed the paper. The embossed county seal shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. It wasn't evidence yet, but it was the beginning of a record. When I stepped back outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and glimmering. Across the lot, a man in a gray hoodie leaned against a car. Evan. He straightened when he saw me, uncertainty flickering in his posture. "You followed me," I said. He shrugged. "Didn't trust the board not to send someone else. They're panicking, Dan. Maryland called an emergency meeting this morning. They're saying you're trying to dissolve the HOA entirely." I almost smiled. "Not yet. Just making sure they're operating under law, not fantasy." Evan rubbed his jaw, eyes darting toward the envelope in my hand. "You really found something?" "Enough to stop them cold." I showed him the seal briefly before tucking it away. "Administrative suspension. They've been enforcing bylaws without legal standing. Everything they've done since last year is void." He exhaled sharply, stepping back like the wind had pushed him. "That'll blow this place open." "That's the point." He looked conflicted again, hands tightening around his car keys. His body language spoke before his mouth did. Restless shoulders, eyes shifting as if searching for an escape. "You know she's not going to take this quietly, right? Cora's the kind who doubles down. She's already talking to an attorney. They'll claim retroactive authority." "They can claim what they want," I said. "Without corporate reinstatement, it's just noise." He nodded slowly, then looked away. "Wish I'd done what you're doing years ago." "Then help me finish it now," I said. He hesitated, but didn't say no. That was enough for now. Back at the car, I called Detective Reeves. "Reeves, you still have the case file from the shooting?" "Yeah, why?" "I want it appended with a supplemental note. HOA under administrative suspension at time of incident. Liability shifts from individual to unregistered collective." There was a pause on the line. "You're building a civil trap, aren't you?" "Not a trap," I said. "A mirror." He chuckled under his breath. "You've always been dangerous when you stay quiet." By the time I returned to Silver Pines, the neighborhood looked different, not physically, but spiritually. The illusion was cracking. Residents were starting to whisper. A woman 2 doors down waved hesitantly as I pulled into the driveway. She hadn't so much as nodded since we moved in. The air smelled like wet pine and fear. Clara met me at the door. "You look like a man who just saw the inside of Pandora's box," she said. more like its return address. I handed her the sealed document. She traced the embossed stamp, reading the words aloud. Administrative suspension. So, they can't touch us anymore? I shook my head. Not yet, but now we have leverage. They can't legally fine us, tow us, or threaten liens. Every rule they've enforced for months can be challenged. Her smile was small but real, the first one since the shooting. Then what happens next? I looked past her at the porch swing, rainwater still dripping from its edge. Next, we bring the truth to daylight. That night, I placed the certified document in my safe, beside an old badge I hadn't worn in years. Different tools, same purpose. The law wasn't a weapon, it was a slow, relentless storm. And Silver Pines was about to find out what a real downpour felt like. By dawn, the storm had moved inland, leaving Silver Pines washed clean, but uneasy. The air smelled of wet mulch and iron, the kind of scent that settles after something's been broken. I brewed coffee and opened the blinds. Across the street, Cora's SUV was gone, but Marilyn's silver sedan sat in her driveway, engine idling, exhaust puffing slow and deliberate. She was waiting for something. Or someone. Clara stirred behind me, wrapping her robe tight. "You're not going out there again, are you?" "I have to," I said. "The board's scrambling. Today they'll either double down or fold. Either way, I need to see which direction the wind's blowing." She placed a hand on my arm. "Just remember, they've already shown you what they're capable of." I nodded, kissed her forehead, and stepped out into the cool morning. The clubhouse parking lot was nearly full when I arrived. The emergency board meeting was supposed to be private, but I recognized half the residents from the neighborhood standing near the entrance, pretending to check their phones while eavesdropping through glass. Inside, voices rose and fell, Marilyn's sharp, Cora's brittle and defensive. I pushed through the door. Conversation snapped silent. Marilyn stood near the head of the long table, papers spread like battle maps. Cora sat at the corner, sunglasses hiding a bruise along her temple. Evan was there too, back against the wall, arms crossed tight, his expression carved from guilt and fatigue. "Well," Marilyn said coolly, "if it isn't our favorite litigator." "I'm not litigating," I replied, "just observing the aftermath of negligence." Cora scoffed. "You think one filing error makes us criminals?" "One filing error makes you powerless," I said evenly. "And your insurance lapse makes you broke. That's a dangerous combination for anyone pretending to govern." Her chair scraped back violently. "You don't get to lecture me about governance, Judge. You're compromised. You're using your position to intimidate a volunteer board." Evan flinched at that word, volunteer, like it tasted bitter. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting between us. His body language screamed tension, the shifting weight, the tapping foot, the jaw muscle twitching every time Marilyn spoke. He wanted to intervene, but fear pinned him to the wall. Marilyn slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. Daniel, whatever you think you found, it doesn't change the fact that this community has rules. If we lose credibility, property values drop, people move. We can't let that happen." I set my briefcase on the table, opened it, and placed the certified document squarely in front of her. "You already lost credibility. This shows your corporate charter has been suspended since March. You've been collecting fines, issuing violations, and enforcing penalties under an entity that legally doesn't exist." She went pale, eyes flicking over the embossed seal. "That's administrative, not judicial. It can be corrected." "Correction doesn't retroactively legalize actions taken while unregistered," I said. "You've jeopardized every homeowner's liability, including your own. The shooting, the citations, all of it. Void." Cora pushed to her feet. "This is extortion." "It's exposure," I said, "and you did it to yourselves." Evan finally spoke, voice rough. "He's right." His gaze dropped to the table, fingers tightening around his wrist. "We were supposed to renew last winter. Marilyn told us she'd handle it. When I asked again in March, she said it was fine. I didn't check. None of us did." Marilyn turned on him, face flushing. "You're really going to side with him?" He met her stare, trembling slightly. "I'm siding with the truth." That silence was the sound of a board collapsing. No argument, no denial. Just the collective realization of how fragile their power had always been. I gathered the paper and locked eyes with Marilyn one last time. I'll be filing for an emergency injunction this week. You'll receive notice from the court. Until then, I'd advise you to cease all enforcement activity." She tried to recover composure, smoothing her skirt. "You think you've won something?" "I don't need to win," I said. "I just need the law to catch up." Evan followed me outside, shoulders sagging, his badge keychain glinting in the sunlight. "You just dropped a bomb in there." "Good," I said. "Maybe it'll wake them up before it destroys the whole neighborhood." He nodded slowly, then rubbed his eyes. "You know what comes next, right? Retaliation. They'll come for you in the only way they can. Paperwork, gossip, pressure." "I'm counting on it," I said, "because every step they take from here leaves a footprint I can use." As I drove away, the clubhouse receded in the rearview mirror, a hollow shell of authority crumbling from the inside. I didn't feel victorious yet, just certain. The law was in motion now, and once it started, there was no stopping it. The following evening, the lake was still, a mirror of dying light framed by pines. I stood on the dock, the boards creaking under my boots, watching ripples spread where the wind touched the water. Silver pines always looked peaceful from here, deceptively so. Beneath that calm reflection was rot, corporate suspension, insurance fraud, and one woman's arrogance with a gun. I heard the gravel crunch behind me before I saw him. Evan Price walked down the slope, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched. He looked older than he had yesterday, like the weight of silence had aged him overnight. "Clara said you'd be out here," he muttered. "She's inside," I said. "Didn't want her near this." He nodded and stepped onto the dock, stopping a few feet short. His body language spoke before his words did. Restless hands, eyes scanning the water. The kind of jitter a man gets when his conscience won't let him sleep. "You were right about everything," he said finally. "The renewal, the insurance, the fines. It's worse than you think." I didn't move. "Go on." He rubbed the back of his neck, breathing through his teeth. "After you left that meeting, Marilyn called an emergency call with the board, said she'd handle it internally. But what she meant was bury it. They've been using leftover funds from last year's community maintenance account to pay personal bills, vacations, landscaping, even her daughter's tuition." I turned to face him. "You have proof?" He hesitated, guilt flickering across his face. "I do. I signed off on a few of those expenses last fall. Routine authorizations, I thought. But last night I checked the ledger. The totals don't add up. They're laundering HOA dues through a dummy vendor account. Cutter Home Services, Marilyn's husband's company. The lake wind shifted, rippling the water between us. For a moment, the world felt smaller, the air heavier. "You're confessing to financial misappropriation," I said quietly. "I'm confessing to ignorance," he shot back. His voice cracked under the strain. "I didn't know until now, Dan. But if I keep quiet, I'm complicit. And I've lived long enough with that word chasing me." He crouched at the edge of the dock, elbows on his knees, staring into the water. "You ever tell yourself you're doing the right thing until the day you realize it's just the convenient thing?" "Too many times," I said. He nodded. "Then you know how this feels." I crouched beside him. "Why tell me?" "Because you're the only one who won't turn this into another scandal," he said. "You'll use it clean. Legally." He glanced up, the reflection of the lake catching in his tired eyes. "I can't fix what I signed, but I can hand you the bullet before they aim it at someone else." "Then hand it," I said. He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket, wrapped in a folded napkin. "Board meeting minutes, payment records, email threads. It's all there. Marilyn's digital fingerprints on every unauthorized transfer." I took it carefully, sliding it into my jacket pocket. "You understand what this means, Evan. Once I file this, there's no undoing it. You'll be testifying against your own board." He looked away. "That board stopped being mine the minute Cora pulled that trigger." The air hung still. Somewhere across the water, a single light blinked on in a lakeside window. I thought about the swing, how it had started as a symbol of peace and turned into the spark that exposed a system. Evan stood, his movement stiff, deliberate. "You should know, they're planning to retaliate before you get that injunction filed. Marilyn wants to hit you with a defamation claim, say you're damaging community reputation for personal gain." "Then she's welcome to try," I said. "Truth is an absolute defense." He smiled faintly, a weary curve that didn't reach his eyes. "You sound just like you did when you were sheriff, before you started wearing the robe." "I still wear both," I said. "One enforces, the other remembers why." He stared out at the water one last time. "You'll make enemies for this, Dan. Real ones." "I already have," I said. Evan turned to leave, his silhouette framed by the dying orange glow across the lake. "If this blows up," he said over his shoulder, "I'll testify. I won't hide behind the badge I used to wear." "Good," I replied, "because this time we finish it the right way." He nodded once, then disappeared into the dark. The sound of his footsteps faded up the slope until only the water remained, calm, deceptive, waiting. I took out the flash drive and looked at it under the fading light. One man's guilt, another's proof. The next move wasn't vengeance, it was evidence. And by sunrise, I'd turn it into justice. By the time the first light broke across the lake, I was already in my study, the flash drive glinting beside the keyboard like a quiet threat. Clara was still asleep upstairs, her breathing slow and steady. Envied her calm. Outside, Silver Pines was stirring. The sound of sprinklers, the low hum of garage doors, people resuming the ritual of pretending everything was fine. But everything was far from fine. I plugged in the drive. It opened without a password, a single folder labeled Board Records 2023. Inside were spreadsheets, scanned invoices, email chains. Each one worse than the last. Payments labeled landscaping maintenance routed to Cutter Home Services. Checks approved by Marilyn, co-signed by Evan, months before he knew what he was enabling. Thousands of dollars siphoned from homeowners under the guise of community care. I didn't need to fabricate outrage. It came naturally. Still, I kept it contained. Law doesn't reward rage. It rewards precision. I started drafting a memorandum. Subject: petition for emergency injunction and financial oversight. Every sentence had to be surgical, verifiable, unemotional, lethal. The evidence had to build quietly until it was undeniable. Halfway through typing, a knock sounded on the front door. I froze. It was too early for visitors. Through the window, I saw a familiar frame. Detective Reeves, jacket collar turned up, eyes sharp with curiosity. I opened the door. "Morning, Judge," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Heard you stirred the hornet's nest yesterday. News travels fast. Faster than you think. Marilyn called the sheriff's office this morning, claiming harassment. Said you've been threatening board members." I almost laughed. "She's using my own restraint against me. That's new." Reeves shrugged. "Standard play, but here's where it gets interesting. County Audit Division got a tip about missing HOA funds last night. Anonymous source sent them digital proof." My eyes flicked toward the study. "Anonymous, huh?" He grinned faintly. "If I had to guess, I'd say your old deputy grew a conscience." "Good," I said. "He's the first one in months to remember what that word means." Reeves's expression sobered. "They'll try to spin this, Dan. If you're taking it to court, do it fast. Once that audit becomes public, they'll shred everything that's left. I'll file by noon." He nodded, adjusting his jacket. "Then I'll make sure it lands on the right desk." After he left, I went back to work. My office filled with the sound of typing, steady, methodical. Every clause pointed like a weapon. I cited the expired corporate charter, the missing insurance, the financial misconduct, attached exhibits, time-stamped communications, the ledger entries from Evan's flash drive. By the time the document reached 20 pages, it wasn't a petition anymore. It was an indictment wrapped in legal formality. At noon, I printed the packet and slipped it into a folder embossed with the state seal. I took one last look at the swing outside the window, Clara sitting there, reading softly to herself, sunlight glinting off the chain. That sight anchored me more than any oath I'd ever sworn. At the courthouse, the clerk recognized me immediately. "Judge Mercer," she said, lowering her voice. "We heard about Silver Pines. You're filing against your own HOA?" "Not against," I corrected. "On behalf of every homeowner who still believes rules should serve justice, not replace it." Her eyes softened. "You'll need to speak to Chief Clerk Lanning. He's been expecting something like this." The filing process took an hour. By the end, I walked out holding a stamped copy. Case Tabar, Ushi 24, CV 3178. Mercer v. Silver Pines Estates HOA. Outside, I stood on the courthouse steps, sunlight cutting through clouds. I took a deep breath and called Clara. "It's done," I said. "You filed it?" "Yes, they can't hide now." Her voice trembled with relief. "What happens next?" "They'll receive notice within 48 hours. After that, every action they take becomes evidence. The board's already broken. They just don't know it yet." As I hung up, my phone buzzed again. "Unknown number," I answered. A pause, then Marilyn's voice, brittle and venomous. "You've made a terrible mistake, Judge. You think the law protects you, but you've just declared war on your own neighbors." I let her finish, then said, "No, Marilyn, I declared law on people who forgot what it means to live under one." Her silence was loud before the line went dead. For the first time in weeks, the air around me felt clean. The fight was no longer personal. It was procedural. That's where I thrived, because in a courtroom, emotion doesn't matter. Only truth does. And I had both. 2 days later, the notice hit Silver Pines like a silent bomb. Every mailbox carried a pale blue envelope stamped with the county seal. Inside, formal language, cool and clean. Notice of pending injunction. Silver Pines. Estates homeowners. Association administrative suspension review. Most residents didn't understand the terminology, but they understood the tone. Something powerful had shifted, and for once, not in the board's favor. From my porch, I watched neighbors step out in robes and slippers, tearing open envelopes, faces tightening in confusion. Some glanced toward my house, others toward Cora's. The balance of fear was starting to tilt. By afternoon, a crowd gathered near the community gazebo, men and women who'd kept their heads down for too long. Clara stood beside me, a soft blanket over her shoulders, despite the sun. "They're waiting for you," she said quietly. "I'm not giving a speech," I answered, "just the facts." "You're not a judge right now," she reminded me. "You're their neighbor. Don't forget that." So I walked down the path and into the circle of uneasy faces. A few dozen homeowners, a mix of retirees, young families, and cautious onlookers. At the center, Marilyn stood beside a folding table, piled with documents, her polished smile already cracking. "Mr. Mercer," she called out, "care to explain why you've dragged this community into a public mess?" I met her stare, unblinking. The mess existed long before I filed anything. I just stopped pretending it was clean. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Evan stood near the back, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. His posture was rigid, like a man waiting for his moment. I raised my voice just enough for everyone to hear. The injunction wasn't filed against the homeowners. It was filed to protect them. The HOA has been operating illegally for nearly a year. They've collected fines, issued threats, and enforced rules with no legal standing. That's not management. It's fraud. Marilyn tried to speak, but someone shouted from the crowd first. "Is that true?" Then another. "Did you know about this?" Her veneer cracked. "Administrative delays happen all the time," she snapped. "We're fixing it." "You can't fix authority that never existed," I said. "Every penalty, every lien, every dollar taken since the lapse is void. You'll need to refund it or face a class action." A few residents gasped. A man in a baseball cap stepped forward. "You mean we've been paying for nothing?" "Worse than nothing," I said. "You've been paying for their silence." The crowd's energy shifted, no longer fear, but anger. Marilyn's cheeks flushed deep red. "You can't come here and incite chaos," she shouted. "I'm not inciting," I said. "I'm informing." Evan finally moved. He walked to the front, the murmur fading as he passed. His body language was tight, but there was conviction now instead of hesitation. He stopped beside me, clearing his throat. "What Daniel's saying is true," he said, voice steady. "I served on that board. I saw the books. They used your dues to cover personal expenses, and they knew the corporate registration was suspended. They just hoped no one would check." The crowd erupted. Gasps, accusations, disbelief. Marilyn spun toward him, her voice trembling. "Evan, you signed those authorizations." "I did," he said, "because I trusted you, and that was my mistake." Cora appeared then, stepping from behind the gazebo, her arm in a sling, a prop more than an injury. "Don't let him fool you," she barked. "He's covering for himself." I turned to her, calm but firm. "You shot an unarmed woman, then hid behind expired authority. Maybe you should sit this one out." Her face blanched, but she said nothing. I held up a single sheet from my folder, the county's certified record. This document nullifies every action this board has taken since March. Tomorrow, a judge will hear the motion to dissolve the current HOA leadership pending reformation. You can either fight it or help rebuild something honest. The silence that followed was heavy and electric. Then, from the back, a woman spoke softly but clearly. "I vote we rebuild." Another voice echoed it, then another. Marilyn's voice cracked, desperate now. "You don't have the authority to vote on anything." Evan turned toward her. "Neither do you." The crowd broke into quiet applause, small at first, then swelling. It wasn't victory yet, but it was awakening. I met Evan's eyes, and for the first time, he looked free. As the gathering dispersed, Clara joined me, slipping her hand into mine. "You turned a porch swing into a revolution," she whispered. "No," I said, watching the last of the light ripple over the lake. "The law did. I just reminded them it still applies, even here." The next morning arrived heavy with humidity and tension. The air felt charged, like the hour before a thunderstorm. I put on my suit for the first time since the filing, the dark navy one that still smelled faintly of courthouse dust, and checked the folder on my desk. Everything was in order: the injunction, the exhibits, the certified suspension notice, and Evan's flash drive. Today wasn't the confrontation. It was the countdown to it. Clara came down the stairs slowly, her shoulders still wrapped, her expression steady but tired. "You look like you're about to sentence someone," she said. "Just hoping to remind them there's still a judge in this neighborhood," I replied. She touched my tie, straightened it. "Be careful, Daniel. They're losing control, and desperate people don't play fair." "I'm counting on that," I said quietly. "It'll make their next mistake public." The county courthouse lot was already filling by the time I arrived, but this hearing wasn't scheduled in one of the grand marble chambers. It was in hearing room C, small, fluorescent lit, meant for zoning disputes and HOA mediations. Fitting. Detective Reeves waited near the door, coffee in hand. "Board sent a lawyer," he said. "Out-of-town firm, overconfident, underinformed." "Perfect," I said. When I stepped inside, Marilyn sat at the front table, her posture immaculate but eyes rimmed red. Cora was beside her, face pale and drawn, sling gone now, an empty performance. Their attorney, a young man in a tailored suit, looked smug in the way only someone unfamiliar with facts could be. Evan sat 2 rows behind them, his head bowed, hands clasped like a man waiting for absolution. The administrative judge entered, briefcase tucked under his arm, glasses low on his nose. "Let's keep this short," he said. "Petition for emergency injunction. Judge Mercer versus Silver Pines Estates HOA. Counsel, you ready?" Marilyn's lawyer rose first, confident. "Your Honor, this case is a personal vendetta dressed as legal action. My clients are volunteers accused of clerical errors. No harm has been proven, and no resident besides Mr. Mercer has filed complaint." The judge turned to me. "Your response?" I stood, placing the certified seal and financial exhibits before him. "Your Honor, these are not clerical errors. The HOA's incorporation lapsed 9 months ago. During that time, they collected fines, issued citations, and used funds for personal expenses through an unregistered entity. They acted under color of authority without standing." The judge leafed through the documents, eyes narrowing. "And these financial transfers?" "Direct to the treasurer's husband's company," I said. "Payments labeled as landscaping and maintenance. Not one invoice tied to verified work." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Even if there were administrative oversights, reinstatement would resolve—" The judge cut him off. "Reinstatement doesn't retroactively authorize illegal activity." Silence, the kind that shifts the air itself. Marilyn's composure faltered. "We were protecting the community," she said suddenly. "Someone had to enforce standards." "Even after firing a gun at a pregnant woman?" I asked. My voice stayed calm even. "Was that part of the standards?" Her lawyer winced. "Irrelevant." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled. It speaks to reckless enforcement." He turned another page, his tone final. "Preliminary injunction granted. All HOA enforcement powers suspended pending full audit and reconstitution. Effective immediately." Marilyn's mouth fell open. Cora muttered something under her breath, too low for the record, but sharp enough to sting. Evan exhaled audibly behind them, as though the decision had pulled 1,000 pounds off his shoulders. The gavel struck once, small, unceremonious, but to me, it sounded like thunder. Outside, reporters waited on the courthouse steps, tipped off by someone, probably Reeves. Microphones rose, questions firing like bullets. Judge Mercer, is it true your HOA was illegally operating? Did the board misuse funds? What's next for Silver Pines? I didn't answer most of them. I just said, the law doesn't stop at the gates of a gated community. Then I walked past the cameras, through the sunlight, and into the calm that follows victory's first echo. When I reached home, Clara was waiting on the porch swing, her book forgotten in her lap. She looked up as I stepped onto the porch. You won. Not yet, I said. We've only stopped them. Now we rebuild. She smiled faintly. You sound like a judge again. Maybe I never stopped being one. I sat beside her, the chain creaking softly, the lake shining through the trees. For the first time in months, the sound didn't feel like defiance. It felt like peace waiting to return. By the time the HOA board called for an open community forum, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Flyers had been slipped under doors overnight, trying to spin the court's injunction as temporary housekeeping, but no one believed it. The county seal on the injunction had carried more weight than any HOA letter ever could. That evening, the community hall overflowed. Rows of folding chairs, residents pressed shoulder to shoulder, murmuring like an approaching storm. The air was thick with humidity and anger. The walls still displayed the HOA's mission statement in glossy lettering. Preserve, protect, prosper. It felt like a lie carved in plastic. Clara sat near the front with a few of the other women, her arms still bandaged beneath her blouse. Detective Reeves stood in the back, arms crossed, keeping quiet watch. And Evan, nervous, pale, trembling, sat near the aisle, his thumb rubbing over his old deputy badge like a prayer bead. At the front, Marilyn took the microphone, forcing a brittle smile. Neighbors, she began, voice quivering slightly. I know there's been confusion these past few days. I want to reassure you that your board remains committed to keeping Silver Pines beautiful, safe, and stable. Someone from the back shouted, You mean profitable for yourself? Laughter rippled, sharp and bitter. Marilyn's smile froze. There have been misunderstandings, she said. Some people, outsiders, are trying to dismantle what we built here. I rose from my seat slowly. You mean people who actually live here? Heads turned. The whispering stopped. I walked toward the front, each step echoing off the tiled floor. Because last I checked, I'm a homeowner. I'm your neighbor. And the only thing I'm dismantling is fraud. Marilyn's jaw tightened. You had your day in court, Judge Mercer. This meeting is for homeowners, not crusaders. I stopped beside the podium. Then it's good on both. A murmur spread through the crowd. Approval this time. I looked out over the residents, parents, retirees, families clutching their HOA dues statements like evidence of betrayal. The court's ruling wasn't rumor, I said. Your HOA's charter expired 9 months ago. Every fine, every threat, every dollar you paid since then went to a ghost entity. You've been governed by nothing but intimidation. Marilyn snatched a folder from the table. That's a gross mischaracterization. The board intends to reinstate its standing immediately. Reinstating after the fact doesn't erase 9 months of theft, I interrupted. You took money under false authority. A man in the crowd shouted, Where's that money now? Marilyn hesitated. Community improvements, she said quickly. Evan stood up, his hands shaking. That's not true. His voice cracked, then steadied. You used it to pay your husband's company. I saw the transfers. I signed some of them, and I was wrong. All eyes swung to him. His face was pale, but his posture straightened as he continued. I was told it was maintenance reimbursement, but the invoices were fake. You used our dues to fund personal expenses, Marilyn. Gasps rippled across the room. Marilyn's composure shattered. Evan, you don't know what you're talking about? Yes, I do, he said. I was there. The room erupted, shouting, accusations, disbelief. Residents stood, waving printed letters and fee notices. You fined my son for parking overnight. You threatened to tow my car. You called the cops on my daughter for playing music. Marilyn slammed her hand against the podium. Order, she shouted, but her voice was drowned beneath the noise. Cora rose beside her, face white, eyes darting between the crowd and the exits. I raised a hand. "Let her speak," I said to the residents. "Let her explain why her husband's company was billing this community for phantom landscaping." Marilyn opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her lawyer, different from the one at court, younger, visibly panicking, whispered something to her, but she shook her head, clutching the mic like it was the last rung of a ladder. This was all an oversight," she stammered. "I never meant to." "You meant to silence people," I said. "You fined us into obedience. You turned community into control, but the law doesn't bend for convenience." Applause thundered through the hall, echoing off the high ceiling. Clara's eyes glistened where she sat, pride cutting through the tension. Reeves didn't move, but I saw the faintest nod from him in the back. Marilyn dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a hollow thud that sounded like resignation. She turned toward Cora, but Cora was already walking out, head bowed, the crowd parting in silence as she passed. Evan exhaled, voice breaking as he said quietly, "It's over." I looked out across the room, the faces of people who had finally realized their fear was optional. "No," I said, "it's beginning. From this moment forward, Silver Pines belongs to its residents, not its rulers." The hall erupted in applause again, louder this time, filled with something cleaner than anger: hope. The night after the forum, Silver Pines was unrecognizable. The hall lights still glowed faintly through the trees, but the tension that had once hung over the neighborhood had lifted like fog burning off in sunlight. For the first time in months, no HOA trucks patrolled the streets, no violation slips fluttered on mailboxes. The stillness wasn't fear anymore. It was relief. I stood on the porch with Clara, the lake stretching out silver and quiet beyond the pines. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of rain that hadn't yet come. The swing creaked softly beneath us, its slow rhythm the sound of something restored. "They'll have to elect a new board," Clara said. "Do you think anyone will even want the job now?" "Someone will," I said. "But next time, they'll answer to the law, not to their own pride." She smiled faintly. "You didn't just win a case, Daniel. You changed how people see this place." I thought about that for a long moment. "Maybe," I said quietly. "But change is only real if it lasts." Down by the cul-de-sac, Evan's truck sat parked with the engine off. He was sitting on the tailgate, head bowed, shoulders slumped. I walked over, the gravel crunching under my shoes. He looked up when he heard me coming. "Long night?" I asked. He chuckled dryly. "Longest of my life. I've had to tell a lot of people I was sorry before, but not this many." "They listened?" I said. "Maybe too late." He rubbed his hands together, eyes distant. "County audit came through this evening. Maryland's account transfers. Every one of them matched the invoices you showed. They're building a criminal case now." I nodded slowly. "Justice doesn't move fast, but it moves." He sighed, then looked up at the houses glowing across the lake. "You know, I joined that board because I thought I'd be helping. I thought rules kept people safe." "They do," I said, "when they're written by people who remember what safety means." He smiled weakly. "You ever think about running for the board yourself?" I laughed once. "After this, I think I've had my fill of neighborhood politics." He stood, extending a hand. "For what it's worth, you gave this place its spine back. People are already planning a vote to dissolve the old HOA charter completely. You'll get your wish, a clean slate." "Good," I said. "Let them build something honest this time." When he drove off, the sound of his tires faded into the quiet hum of crickets. Clara called my name from the porch. She was holding her phone out, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You should see this," she said. It was a news post. "Local judge exposes corrupt HOA. Inspires countywide reform." The headline was dramatic, the photo grainy but clear. Me standing in front of the community hall, microphone in hand, Cora and Marilyn behind me, faces frozen mid-denial. The story had already spread beyond the county. Homeowners from other neighborhoods were commenting, sharing their own stories of abuse, overreach, and intimidation. Clara looked up at me. "You didn't just fix Silver Pines, Daniel. You gave people permission to fight back." I exhaled, watching the glow of her phone fade as the screen dimmed. Then maybe it was worth all the noise. She leaned her head on my shoulder. It was worth everything. We sat in silence, the swing moving gently under our weight. The moon rose slow and full over the lake, painting the water in silver streaks. For the first time since the shot, I felt peace, not the kind that hides, but the kind that stays. I thought of Evan, finally free of his guilt, of Reeves, who'd quietly made sure the case reached the right ears, of the families who would never again open their mailboxes to find threats disguised as rules. Silver Pines wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was real now, honest, and that was enough. As I looked out over the calm water, I said what I knew needed to be said, not to Clara, not to the neighborhood, but to anyone still living under someone else's control. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. The chain creaked again, steady and rhythmic, the sound of balance returning. I closed my eyes, let the night air fill my lungs, and finally allowed myself to rest. Justice, like the lake, had gone still again, but not silent.